So here I am catching up after a huge marathon election lasting over 7 stages. And what we have is a remarkable country and a remarkable election and a remarkable verdict. A verdict that has been delivered in such a nuanced, balanced way that almost all the impossible equations, all the impossible combinations which had been discussed and dissected and analyzed by so many, but really it's the common man on the street, the one whose wisdom we actually never even thought about, we didn't discuss enough about, and whom we dismissed, who have actually, with great amount of shrewdness, balanced the power of the country. It is the silent voter who have holding back this power of the vote and literally dealing the blow when it really mattered, and in a manner that actually reinforces their resentment, their need for change, and in some sense their commentary on exactly how and what they feel about this country, and exactly what they feel about each and every leader in every part of the country, and also clearly saying where and how they would like people to pull their socks up. State after state, it threw up many a surprise. Mostly it did deliver a lot of poetic justice. It took away leadership from those who claimed to be leaders. It humbled many who thought they were above the people of the country. It rewarded quite a lot of people who had genuinely worked, and a very few, of course, who deserved better did not really cut or to the final race. There were quite a few questions that were on my mind, or rather observations more than questions, and I was initially planning to do this recording much before the verdicts had come out and much before all this current I will do another video literally analyzing where we stand as of today, and how this beautiful balance that has been struck by the people of India, and what it means for the stability going forward, and how the balance of power, the opposition, the current government that's probably going to get sworn in soon, a lot of aspects about that. But before we do that episode, there are a few observations that I think was on my mind, and I was keen to probably share them. And these are just, some of them are questions, some of them are observations, some of them are just thrown out to you out there. And in a nice way, in a polite way, it would be lovely to know your views too. Critique is so important, because at the core, I am a passionate and both observer of what is happening around me. But I would always like to keep my critical faculties intact, and I welcome you to do the same. Whatever I post or whatever I share, you don't have to agree with it, but it would be amazing to know exactly in what ways you disagree, or what other counter views that you might hold. Now that is very enriching, because it gives me a perspective, it teaches me a lot of things out there. And if you like something of what I'm sharing, then adding some aspects to what I'm sharing and your resonance with it also enriches my perspective and gives me a greater understanding of this beautiful country of ours. Now, some of these questions. And I would like to again kind of reinforce the fact that these questions were written down by me much before the results, and much while at the fag end of the elections itself. So we start with the question of, like, did Modi and Mr. Shah successfully actually destroy both the country and the BJP? This is a big question. I know it's a very controversial question. But what really has won the game at the end of the day? As the NDA won and the BJP lost, what have people accepted or what have people rejected? Have people accepted the policies, the stand, the behavior, the attitude, a lot of things about Mr. Modi and Shah? And have they sort of, in the bargain, managed to literally destroy a very powerful entity called the BJP? Is it the same entity that they took on, have they actually gone and built it better, or have they become larger than the institution that backed them? What are their equations with the RSS? I'm sure across many channels you're also aware of these questions being, raised. So that's one, the first question. The second one is that the long-drawn election schedule was supposed to be in favor of the BJP and the PM to sort of ride on waves of success, as one want to put it. But have they really, in some sense, worked against them? Because what happened was that we started with the south of India, and also like very belligerent states like, say, Tamil Nadu and Kerala, and so many states which were not necessarily in awe of the BJP or its policies or its way of looking at India and the country and the constitution and its people. So in some sense, instead of riding wave after wave of success, somewhere it became like, I would say, receding waves, which literally there was no wave. The waves are more of receding waves, and at every stage it sort of it was like a snowball effect where it just kept on piling up in terms of what was not working in their favor, and it started working in the favor of the opposition. So yes, the long drawn election schedule for sure did not work in favor of the BJP. What are your thoughts on this? And has the biggest, actually, I would say, the biggest reason that the verdict came the way it did was really Mr. Modi, the way he behaved, the way he spoke, did his taunts and his barbs and his general very lowered discourse. Actually, did it prove to be like the biggest setback for both himself and his party? Literally, was it his, I wouldn't want to say this, but yes, his foul mouth and his lack of, finesse, his lack of poise that you would expect from the topmost leader of the country, did that really sort of disgust everybody, including some of his very ardent followers? So was he like the critical reason where the verdict came the way it did? Obviously amidst a lot of other factors too, but was that a big primary reason that the wave didn't happen because he himself was standing and blocking the wave? The fourth aspect is that the opposition, especially the Congress and of course a lot of the others too, did they actually pull up their socks and in some way come together more this time with a common agenda, a purpose, a goal, than about individual egos or aspirations? The Congress itself, the Indian National Congress, did they really pull up their socks? They seem to have gotten sharper, and I would say a little meaner too, because usually one associated a lot of taunts and barbs and the battle more from the BJP side, and always the Congress caught on the back foot or something. But this time around, the Congress seemed well capable of handling its own and really hitting back very sharp, both with the discourse, with the narrative, keeping it consistent, not getting sidetracked, or also not sort of raising to the bait every time they were invited to. So this time it was really very, very mature the way that the opposition pulled its act together. And to a great extent, I think the success of this election the hero of this election, so to say, would be Rahul Gandhi. And most people are aware that I hold him in high esteem, not so much as a leader, but as a man, as a good man, a man of principles, and as somebody who literally, in a world which is so filled with hate, who chose actually to not reciprocate hate with hate, but with a far more nuanced aspect of love, connection. He's somebody who's interested in healing the world rather than in aggravating the world. And I think as a person, I look up to him very highly. But as a leader, I think he's literally come into his full form. You could see him, you look at the body language, you look at the ease, you look at his narrative, you look at everything. He was literally reveling in this election, appearing at ease. He was witty, he was younger, he was vibrant. He was also fully present without fatigue. Fatigue is something that, especially when you're going over about a 2.5 month period, I'm not just meaning the fatigue of every day or the, the literal grueling ask from the election. I also mean fatigue from something that totally doesn't interest you or where you're not fully present. There are points where you zone out, and I did not see him zoning out during this entire period. He was fully present in every form. There also seems to be, during this election, a very sharp contrast in terms of the PM definitely seemed more older, more aged. He was speaking vague, he was more garrulous, almost like an old person, senile at times, sorry to say this. And topics that he chose were also, the PM's topics were pretty vague. It was not a precise hitting or not hitting the bullseye. It was like random arrows just thrown frantically around, or in the hope that one of it would hit somewhere. So most of the topics that he raised lacked substance, relevance, class, and even the clothing, wearing fancy dresses and holding a lotus in a parade. He just actually, to be very honest, looked downright old, clownish, and silly. In contrast, I think Rahul Gandhi held himself well. He held himself comfortable. So there was definitely a certain different energy that both of these were bringing to the whole 2 months. And people, I think, resonated a lot with this difference of perceived aging and energy levels and the sharpness of how they were putting themselves out. And towards the end, it was very obvious that there was a scrambling of sorts in terms of how the Prime Minister Modi was trying really to sort of come back into the media game, or to be perceived as somebody open to dialogues, to being asked questions. But predominantly all of them were all exclusive interviews, and none of them felt exclusive. Nobody was dying to hear what he had to say. People were not going live or catching him live. There was not this intense desire to know exactly, see him as a hero, or literally wait for what his words would be. So he didn't really also seem to enjoy the same traction online. And again, was it like because he really had nothing to say? And whatever little he had to say was done in the public domain, and they were not very classy. So there was really not a great interest in his private interviews that he gave exclusively to people, compliant reporters. Then comes the very important aspect of how much really did the Bharat Jodo and the Nyaya Yatra literally, and of course the very critical question of the Congress manifesto, how did it really play a role? It played a huge role, because until then there was a lot of critique about the Congress, saying that they were only critical of Mr. Modi or his policies or his government, but they really didn't have solutions. So when the manifesto actually pinned down a bunch of things that it wanted to bring to the people of India, and when I say people of India, it's people of India from all walks of life, cutting across, but predominantly the core, the real India, or real India is unfair, because almost everybody forms a part of the nation. But to a great extent, the poor, the often missed, the often and recently not often talked about people, the bulk of the nation. The manifesto addressed a lot of these people who steadily have now slipped out of the main narratives of the BJP. So the Jodo Yatra and Bharat Jodo Yatra and the Nyaya Yatra played a huge role, and the Congress manifesto played a huge role in this perceived shift of the Congress, its intention, and it probably also as a primary builder of the country. Then also, when you really look at the alliances, the BJP this time, when you look across the country, really didn't have very many notable alliances. They had a limited few, and of course, post the results, we know the role that they are playing in the formation of the new government. But really, in most of the states, the BJP was struggling to strike really huge alliances, because somewhere the collaborative nature of what it would have was needed was missing. But in contrast, I think the India bloc really held themselves well as a combined collaborative force. Imagine the point where the earlier, the FM literally had to say that they would welcome just about anybody and everybody into an alliance. So there was a huge shift from a push. Like earlier, they had the pull factor, the BJP had the pull factor, but this election, they literally had to have the push factor in order to be even getting the kind of alliances that they did. So there were not enough takers who were dying to partner with the BJP. And also, what happened was that the success of the South in repelling the BJP actually helped to change the narrative in the North. So there has been a conscious or maybe a political plan behind the lack of jobs in the North, the lack of opportunities in the North of India, the lack of industrialization, everything, the lack of focus on healthcare or on education or empowerment of women, a lot of these things in the North. And because of which what is happening is a huge migration to the South of India for better opportunities, for better livelihoods, and for better futures for their family. So the whole idea, which I think people like the BJP were hoping, was that this bulk of movement from the North would change the political landscape of the South. But instead, what I strongly, and this is my personal view, that the exposure to the kind of growth in the South, the kind of politics of the South, the people of the South, their focus on education, their better well-being, their families being smaller, their children being healthier, their women being more empowered, their girl children being more educated. A lot of these have actually starting to influence the kind of politics that the North feels it deserves now and which it never had till now. So there is definitely a different ask which has come through this exposure of traveling to the South, seeing politics other than what they have been exposed to in the North. So it's literally changing the way that they are going to go back there, vote, the kind of things that they're going to ask out of their leaders. So instead of the South becoming like the North, there would be gradually a lot of ask and demand for the North to also become like the flourishing South. And the thing was that basically this concept of India for all, the notion of an inclusive India. Now the Bharat Jodo actually brought a lot of people together, and it reinforced the nature of the very essence of India and the nature of India. And the India Alliance forming after that, which also sort of reinforced the federal nature of India, the coming together of the multicultural, the coming together of its many people. So in some sense, they all, it was like a beautiful flow, because you had the Yatra, then you had the critical questions during the Nyaya Yatra, and then you had the India Alliance, then you had the political will of bringing leaders together, and even the kind of ease and energy and the exchange of each state with each other, or the fact that they're all equally valid. So it kind of reinforced the possibility of a happier, more inclusive, mutually respectful India back into the central narrative, and a very valid option, which seemed far more nicer option in comparison to a hate-filled Hindutva India alone. So these are some of the questions. There are a few more. And a lot of the predictions, if you look at the analysis, they were flawed for the simple reason, especially I'm talking about before the results were out and during the course of the elections. They were flawed for the simple reason that the popular ones couldn't directly voice the obvious, that simply there were not enough takers for Mr. Modi. Even the BJP and the RSS, and a lot of them were very obviously keeping a distance. So there was really not a single state where the BJP was sparkling, and where its policies and its impact on the ground had created such a strong benchmark or such a strong case study that others said, I want to be like that. I want to be like that state. They didn't have it. So what happens now? Yes, I shall bring out a separate, I have quite a few views about it, and I would love to share them. Of course, as usual, you can dish it, you can critique it, or you could share some views, or you could add your own to what I put out there. But yes, I think we are in a great situation. And whatever plays out in the next few months, whatever appears as chaos is actually a lot of restoration of balance that would be happening, and we are in a great space today. So what next is also, it's very critical that we have to weed out the poison in every home, in every institution, in every community. The change that has come in is existing in every single home, where we have, what has been challenged is not just the politics of the country. What has been challenged is the narrative that we are first nice people. We have a certain culture that is about good breeding, that we can discourse, that we can debate healthy, that we can share differences and still coexist very well. The poison is there in every house in terms of how rationality and scientific temperament is taken a backseat against blind faith, about how we're willing to overlook anything and everything just in blind adulation of somebody who's probably not even worthy of that kind of level of fervor and adulation. So there is that poison to be weeded out of every single home, every single family, every single groups. And this is a job that every one of us have to continue to do, but continue to do it with affection, continue to do it with the faith that has now been gifted to us by the humble people of India, the poor, the middle class, and a lot of them, they have literally restored this democracy back to us. They have also put this huge weight of bringing sense and sensibility and sanity and dignity back into every home, into every discussion, into every community. What else can we do in order to improve where this country could go? Every one of us would have to now start thinking about citizenry. What is it to be a citizen of this country? What is it to build it? What is the responsibility and accountability that we would own up to? And how do we really understand the Constitution? How do we really bring it in letter and spirit more and more? What can we demand out of our institutions so that they cannot favor one person over the other? Also, how do we revive data, accountability? How do we bring professionalism back into the game? How long do you think it would take? Maybe forever. Maybe it's because India is a concept. It took a great amount of audacity by those who fought for its freedom, those who framed its constitution, those that believed in its federal structure, those who brought such a mix of states together, so different from each other. Because India, in most sense, is almost like a continent more than a country. It's almost like a continent with a lot of small countries that have come together. It is a union. It's a union. So the more we honor this union, the more that we respect its people, its many people, the more that we really bring this immense curiosity about our differences. Now, all of them are what each of us have to own up to and take this journey forward. But right now, it's a very good period that we are ready to usher in again. There is plenty to do, plenty to repair, plenty to find out and unearth, because there has been a lot of mismanagement that's happened in the last 10 years. There is going to be a lot of political churn, but all said and done, we have ensured that the powerful is not powerful enough to disrupt, and the opposition is strong enough to question. And it's also, the biggest thing is it's removed fear from the mind of every Indian. Most Indians have finding their voice, and many Indians, surprisingly, they're spying too.